Welcome to FPL Mate, my name is Dan, and today we're going to tell you everything you need to know about the blank and double game weeks for the rest of the season, particularly in game week 36 and 37, where there are actually a few surprises that maybe we didn't see coming. So that's all coming up in today's stream clip. I hope you enjoy. This is what we're dealing with, guys. This is what we're dealing with in terms of game week 36 and 37. So let me explain what's happened. So game week 36 looked like it was going to be dependent on the winners of the FA Cup semi-finals and therefore progressing to the final of the FA Cup. These are the teams and their game week 37 opponents that were in danger of having their fixture moved from game week 37 to 36. Because what's basically happening is, if we have a look at the fixtures in game week 37, like so, what we can see is that, of course, the FA Cup final is taking place on Saturday, the 17th of May. Now, there are no Premier League games scheduled on Saturday, the 17th of May, but Man City and Crystal Palace are two teams now playing in the FA Cup final. And of course, they're currently scheduled to play on the Sunday, the day after the FA Cup final. Of course, that can't happen. You can't play the FA Cup final and be expected to play football the following day. That would be ridiculous. That would be crazy. So what is going to happen is one of two things. Either the Crystal Palace versus Wolves and Man City versus Bournemouth games will be moved into a later date, midweek of game week 37. So sometime between 37 and 38, probably maybe a Wednesday or maybe a Thursday there. One of those 2 days. Or the fixtures from game week 37, again, involving Crystal Palace, Wolves, Man City and Bournemouth, will be moved instead in the other direction into game week 36. Again, in the midweek, most likely we're looking at a Tuesday, perhaps. We would probably say Tuesday, maybe a Wednesday for Crystal Palace. The problem is with doing that is it's not great, particularly for Man City and Crystal Palace, who, you know, maybe Man City more so, but there's not as too much to play for these teams. You know, these teams are not going to get relegated. They're not going to win the Premier League. Their biggest success this season will be that FA Cup, whether they win the FA Cup or not. This is the biggest game for both of these teams for the rest of the season. You can argue that maybe Man City making sure they get a Champions League position for next season is important too. But this is a really important game. Are they going to want to play a midweek game just a few days before the FA Cup final? And the answer is probably no. So therefore, is that fixture going to move into game week 36? Probably no. Previously, it was considered pretty important to move it into game week 36 because in the midweek of game week 37, we have the Europa League final. So if it was going to be the fixture of Aston Villa versus Spurs, for example, if that needed to be moved, then that would have to move into game week 36. It can't move into the midweek of game week 37 because that would clash with the Europa League final. So that is pretty difficult there because now we have a situation where there is no motivation really to move these fixtures into game week 36. Because these teams, Man City, Crystal Palace, would far prefer to play their extra game in the season after the FA Cup final rather than a few days before the FA Cup final. That is going to be what is pretty likely to happen. So that brings us to the graphic that we just had on screen a second ago, where we see that it's kind of down to a few teams. So let's just do Bournemouth, Man City, Crystal Palace and Wolves. These teams have a good chance of keeping their fixture in game week 37 now and it moving into the midweek of game week 37, meaning no doubles and no blanks for any of those four teams. Previously, it looked like we could get some game week 37 doubles. It really, the Aston Villa game was a big part of that. If Aston Villa beat Crystal Palace, then I would say it's very, 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 very likely that we would get a double in 36 and a blank in 37 for the FA Cup finalists and their game week 37 opponents. But that no longer seems to be the case because there really is no need. There's really no actual physical need to move the fixture into game week 36 now, and it seems that it'll probably be the preference to keep it within game week 37 but move to the midweek slots of game week 37 instead. And now that brings us to our next point. So obviously I've spoken about the FA Cup finalists and their scheduled game week 37 opponents. What you may have noticed is we also see Aston Villa and Spurs with a small chance of a double in 36 and blank in 37, according to this graphic. And there is a reason for that. There is a very good reason for that. This is not a mistake. This is not a mistake. So let me divert your attention to this tweet. And they link to a news article. The news article is the exact same words as the tweet, so we don't need to go to the news article here, really. But Tottenham Hotspur have basically announced, we should like to inform supporters that we are in discussions with the Premier League regarding a change in our date to our away match against Aston Villa, currently scheduled for Sunday, the 18th of May. Further information surrounding this fixture will be announced in due course. So this is this fixture here. Game week 37, Aston Villa versus Spurs. So the reason why is because Spurs have a pretty good chance of reaching the Europa League final, which will take place in the midweek of game week 37. They've got a pretty good chance there, and that's going to be super important to them. Really, really important to Spurs to make sure they do win the Europa League, because that's their only access to the Champions League at this point. So because of that, they have requested that they have their game week 37 moved a little bit earlier, just so they have an adequate rest time before that very, very important game for them. So that's going to involve moving that fixture somewhere. Well, it can't, of course, move to Saturday, because Saturday is FA Cup final day. Or FA Cup final day, there's never any, rarely any Premier League football on the same day. That is pure focus on the FA Cup, or at least that is the hope of the competition under their current aims for the competition. It could go on back into Friday, so back a few days, giving Spurs 6 days rest until the Europa League final onto the Friday. But that would be at the same time as a big game between Chelsea and Manchester United. Both of these games due to be televised, by the way. Both Chelsea versus Man United and Aston Villa versus Spurs. These are big games of football. We have the television companies to compete with here. Are they going to want to have two very big games both on at the same time on Friday? Perhaps not. So could instead Aston Villa versus Spurs move to the Thursday? And what we see with FPL is basically the game week always starts on the Friday. I say always. It usually starts from the Friday. If there are weekend games, Friday is the starting point. So if the game is moved to Thursday, Aston Villa versus Spurs this is, if it is moved to Thursday, if Spurs get their request fulfilled to play that game a little bit earlier, that Aston Villa versus Spurs game moving to Thursday, or potentially Wednesday, that would actually slot it into game week 36, giving both Aston Villa and Spurs a double game week 36. Aston Villa and Spurs double. Yes, the dream is not over for Aston Villa. It really isn't. We thought that the double game week was done, but it is not, because of that request from Spurs to try and get that fixture moved, essentially. So this is what we're dealing with, guys. I would say that at this point, perhaps it's actually Aston Villa and Spurs who are the most likely teams to have a double in game week 36. Because the other teams, whilst it definitely could fit into game week 36 for Bournemouth, Man City, Crystal Palace and Wolves, yes, it could fit into game week 36, but I'm not really sure there's a strong motivation to put it there. It definitely could still happen, and I don't want to say right now, guys, yeah, it's not going to happen. I don't want to feel too downbeat about this one, because anything's possible. We know with the scheduling so far this season, the Premier League tend to be proactive with these things, and there may have been an initial rough plan to move these fixtures into game week 36, or at least have it as a contingency plan. But I think it would be in everyone's best interest, actually, if certainly Bournemouth, Man City, Crystal Palace, Wolves actually moved into the later date within game week 37 anyway, meaning no blanks and no doubles for any of those teams. So, all of the predictions we've been making have kind of gone out the window to a degree. To a degree. Of course, we're always dealing with possibilities rather than certainties. And for the record, I know people will be asking, when will this be announced? When will we get confirmation on this? I would be very surprised if we didn't have this information confirmed by the Game Week 35 deadline. I mean, we're talking Game Week 36. What is it? Like, well, the fixtures would be moved to just over 2 weeks from now. And, you know, the Premier League, they try and be fair when they can. They try and give the fans of teams enough notice so they can attend games and make their plans, their travel plans and what have you, to ensure they can attend these games. So I would be very surprised if we didn't get this announcement within the next few days, to be honest, to get a confirmation on this. Hopefully all of it confirmed in one go, but we could see the FA Cup finalists games announced maybe first, and then we'll get the Spurs Aston Villa announcement maybe separately to that, but hopefully all in one go, but all of it within this week, which is great, and we'll get confirmation on that. So in that sense, if you are planning transfers, I would certainly be holding off at least until we get that announcement. I know some people got itchy feet, they want to make their transfers as soon as possible. We've got another Premier League game to play, of course. We've got Champions League as well in the midweek as well. So other European competition. We've got lots to happen within the midweek still. So lots can change, including these very important fixture announcements that could be announced at any moment throughout this week. And I think a lot of people will be pretty gutted if they made a transfer and then they found out they got the confirmed information about doubles and blanks and it wasn't quite what they were expecting. So yeah, guys, if you can hold off, I would definitely recommend that you guys do that. But there you go, guys. That is what the table of fixtures is looking like. No team is super likely to have a double anymore. No team is super likely to have a blank anymore. And, you know, there's a very, very good chance that we just see every game week between now and the end of the season just as normal single game weeks for every team. Very good chance of that happening. And, you know, that is really, really obviously disappointing for those people who were patient with their chips, perhaps, or, you know, planned way in advance for these kind of possibilities. But honestly, it's been a difficult season for planning with doubles and blanks this season. I think a lot of people have struggled really to get these predictions right, because I think there has been a few surprises in the FA Cup, of course, and a few surprises with scheduling, generally speaking, where the Premier League have done things a little bit differently this year. Now, it's been a different season. The FA Cup was obviously changed the way the FA Cup format has been changed for this season. So maybe there was due to be a couple of surprises here, and maybe this is kind of a learning season for the kind of scheduling and the planning rather than something we would necessarily expect to know. But I think it certainly has been punishing for those who have held their chips. But what does this mean if you do have chips left? What to do? Well, of course, I'll wait for announcements. But it's interesting. If you have a bench boost, you're probably going to be bench boosting single game week players, but then anyone who bench boost in game week 34 or 33, they were doing that anyway. They were bench boosting single game week players. So I don't think you're really down on those guys, particularly if you've got a triple captain and there's no double game weeks. Well, hey, I mean, there's still some nice fixtures here. You know, game week 36 with or without a double game week, you're still going to have your Marmouche against Southampton, which could be pretty nice. Again, no different to those who triple captained Haaland previously in the season on a single game week. So again, I don't think you're too down there. If you have your free hit still or your wild card still, I think it's a little tougher. If there is no doubles or blanks, you're probably a little more hard done by if you held on to your wild card and free hit, just because there's not really too much to play them for in terms of strategy, in terms of kind of double and blank game week, alternating game weeks kind of strategy that way. Not really an opportunity for that anymore between now and the end of the season. But hey, you know, if you're playing a wild card, you're going to improve your team with it. If you're playing a free hit, you can have a very good team for an individual game week. So if I had a free hit, for example, at this point, I would probably be looking at playing it in game week 38 if there is no doubles. Of course, if there is, you can still have a look at game week 36 and 37, depending if you have a lot of doublers and a lot of blankers, or not many in your non-free hit team. As for the wild card, I think probably at this point you just got to play it, build your best team, and yeah, hope for the best, to be honest. So anyway, that is my whole spiel on double and blank game weeks. Hopefully that is a decent little update for you guys. So you know what is going on, what is the latest. But as I say, I think we're going to get guaranteed information before the Game Week 35 deadline, so that should be really helpful there. Quick look through the chat, just in case you guys have any questions or concerns around this. We see Scott here says, I'm slightly confused why no one really said that if certain teams made the final, it made it less likely for a double. Yeah, no, I definitely did say that in a couple of videos last week, that if Aston Villa made the final, that greatly increases the chances of doubles in 36 and blanks in 37. I think I would have said it in previous videos as well, just because of that clash with Spurs and their Europa League final. So that was definitely mentioned. So, you know, obviously I don't expect people to see every video and have every piece of information all of the time, but it certainly was out there. Are these double 90% confirmed? No, they're kind of more 90% not confirmed is probably what I would say, Arib. Probably not, maybe not all of them. I would say that, you know, we're looking at maybe 10 to 20% chance of of Bournemouth, Crystal Palace, Man City and Wolves. And we're probably looking at more like 30 to 40% chance for Aston Villa and Spurs. So Aston Villa and Spurs, slightly more chance, but I don't think any of them are looking super likely right now. Machiavelli says, will Haaland be ready for the double? Well, he is back in training, so that is of course positive. Will he be ready for the double game week or not? Will he be saved for the FA Cup final, perhaps instead? This assumes there is a final. Assumes there is a final. Assumes there is a double here anyway for the likes of Haaland. And Arif says, what's the logic behind it? I've gone over the logic already. I'm not going to repeat it, but this will be re-uploaded as a video, so you'll be able to check that out in full. Best team to use assistant manager chip on. Yeah, okay, I did forget about the assistant manager, to be fair. If you do still have the assistant manager chip and there is no doubles, it's a tricky one. It depends if you want to take a risk with the table bonus or not. We can have a look through some of these fixtures, though. We may as well do a little bit of a assistant manager spiel to finish off this kind of strategy and planning part of the video. So let's go on the hub fixture analyzer and have a look here if we can find teams with good fixtures, basically. So it looks like West Ham have pretty good fixtures. You could get table bonus against Nottingham Forest there. Man City also with very nice fixtures here as well. You could maybe go Wolves, Southampton, Bournemouth as a triple up of fixtures there. Aston Villa, don't think I would go there. Looks like a couple of banana skin ones there. Same with Nottingham Forest, not in great form. Crystal Palace don't seem to have any table bonus outside of Forest and Liverpool. I'm just going to double check that actually. Are we still on table bonus there for... We should be, right? For Forest versus Crystal Palace. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes, 6 places between them. So Crystal Palace is a potential table bonus fixture against Forest there, which is quite nice. And then after that, Spurs and Wolves. Are they good enough fixtures? Maybe, not sure. If you're a fan of Wolves right now, I guess you could go for them. They're pretty low in the table, so you're going to get some table bonus, but you're not going to get it against everyone. They're 13th, so they're not going to get table bonus against Brighton or Palace or Brentford, just Man City. So again, yeah, not super sure about that one. So I think you've probably got two routes looking at this. On initial inspection, you're not going to go for any of these teams at the bottom. You could probably not going to go for Manchester United. No table bonus really for Brentford. A little bit Fulham, but again, not super trustworthy. All right, here's a couple of suggestions for you guys. So Bournemouth are in 10th. They're not currently eligible for table bonus against Aston Villa, but that could potentially change in game week 35. So you could look at Bournemouth for table bonus. You could look at Crystal Palace for a better table bonus. And if you just want to play it safe, Man City have enough good fixtures here that you could just play it pretty simple on the assistant manager with Pep Guardiola, particularly if you only doubled up. But if we get a double game week somewhere along the line, I think that does change. I think Man City would look pretty good for an assistant manager because it is so difficult to pick out Man City players. You're gonna have Gavardio, you're gonna have Marmoush. Outside of that, it's gonna be tricky to decide on a Man City player to pick for your team. So for that reason, perhaps Man City would be the way forward. Outside of that, could we maybe do a West Ham? Probably not. Probably not. Yeah, so there you go. That's some assistant manager spiel for you guys. Right, so if you're watching this as a video, it's going to end right about now. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this one, drop a like, do subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll see you later, mates. Bye-bye.